Hello, welcome back to our channel. In today's video, I am sharing with you an ultimate horror reading tag that I have created. There are 10 questions designed to help you get to know your favourite booktubers that little bit better. These are designed to help you dig that little bit deeper, to share some thoughts and opinions and reflections on not just horror novels, but the horror genre. Some of these questions I haven't seen in a book tag type video before, so I think you're going to get some really original and interesting answers. Like, I haven't seen these around, so I cannot wait to hear what my fellow booktubers also answer these questions, but also what your answers might be in the comments. If you haven't already, please like, comment and subscribe. These are some of the books that I would like to briefly touch on in this video today, so we'll be getting through a few of these, and let's start with question number 1. The questions are just behind me, so if I look to the side, that's because I've written 1 to 10 down just to the left. So question number 1 is, which horror work has the most iconic and unforgettable villain or monster? When I think about villains or monsters, I am drawn straight away to Shelley's Frankenstein. This is my copy. I think this work has left an incredible legacy on the horror genre, and I think there is something unique about Victor's unchecked ambition. Like, he is so ambitiously trying to create this thing. He is trying to play God, and there's this total hubristic denial of the creature that he has made, like what his hands have created. And I think one of the most famous monster sort of depictions of the other and the outsider, of the alienated self. And she also captures the monster's isolation and loneliness, which is quite emotive, I think, for an early horror work. I think this book captures the early ideas of terror and fear very well. It also shows the dangerous limits of human knowledge and also our human desires. I don't think you can think of a more iconic monster than Victor's creation, than the monster. Question number 2. Can you recommend a horror book that deserves more recognition? Absolutely I can. I have for you a book that I talked about in my bookshelf tour, but I really want to recommend again to you, and it is called Tiny Nightmares. This is a fascinating horror anthology because these are micro horrors, so it's micro short stories, and it's so creative just because of the tiny word count for some of them. They are just diddy, and they are so effective, they are so scary. Some of them are only a page or so, and I think the sparse use of language, the economic use of language, there is barely any space to breathe with some of these stories in here. Some of them are a page long, and I think they do so much with such a little word count, and I think it's really worth a read. 2 of the authors I think that drew me to this collection was Shavissa Woods. She wrote a very strange collection of short stories that I read years ago called How to Be Goth in the Country, and then there's also a sort of horror king, Stephen Graham Jones is in here. There's a couple of other good female writers, so this is one I would like to see more people read because I think it's definitely worth it. Question 3 is, share a subgenre of horror that you really love. I am really enjoying horror, but dystopian horror, end of world horror. I have 4 books that I would like to share that represent that. These are the 4 that particularly I really like, and I've read in the last couple of years. The first one is set in a nuclear war or a nuclear holocaust or some sort of nuclear type event, we don't quite know, and that makes for a really good horror thriller. The next one is again another horror thriller where it's the end of the world and there's some other stuff going on, and there's kind of plague, contagion sort of vibes. Really great. Station 11, I'm sure so many of you have already read this. It's not actually labelled as a horror, but to me there was so much fear in this. I read this at the peak of lockdown, and in this novel there is a sort of corona type flu virus that wipes out so much of the earth, and people are trying to build this world back up again, but this novel has a great amount of darkness to it, so I would recommend it as a hybrid kind of horror thriller dystopian kind of read. And also the future, I think this is fantastic, and it's also quite bleak, even though this is more leaning towards technological dystopia, the world ending potentially. It's so dark. Question 4 is, which horror novel made you reflect most deeply on an emotion or a feeling in your life? This could be on any emotion or aspect, like it could be grief, mortality, alienation, or Shane, I wanted to include this question because I personally think that horror novels are wonderful at exploring some of the deep and really dark aspects of our humanity and our human experience, and I know I'm certainly not the first person to have articulated that sentiment, but one book that really made me feel quite deeply introspective about the theme of isolation was I'm Legend by Richard Matheson. The lead protagonist, Robert Neville, is potentially one of the last surviving humans of the human race in a world that is now plagued by these petrifying vampiric creatures, and he is so isolated from company or society, and his solitude is depicted so intensely that it really drew a deep amount of feeling from me. I remember feeling very upset the first time I read this. This book captures solitude and loneliness in a way that just is so impactful, and Robert goes through a lot of psychological stress from this isolation, as I think any of us would, and it is devastating to see him have this shifting realization that his humanity is not what he thinks it is, and that this monstrous other, again with this idea of the other, these vampire creatures, they are now the majority and he is the minority. He realizes very gradually that he is the other, and that shifting realization that he is the outsider in this new developing world order is painful. It is painful to read about. So this is, yeah, themes of isolation, this one. Question number 5 is, what was the last book you had to put down because it was too disturbing and scary? I don't enjoy violence for violence sake, and I'm fairly good at gauging what is going to push my boundaries enough to petrify me but without psychologically scarring me, if that makes any sense at all. The last book that I really do remember putting down and having to like leave for a bit from a place of real disgust was probably Ian McEwan's The Cement Garden. It makes one feel awful, and if you know, you know. Question 6 is, share a horror novel that you think has been made into a great movie adaptation. For this, I have chosen American Psycho by Bret Easton Ellis. I think this is one of the rare examples where the movie is better than the book. I think the film is incredible because it takes some of the really heavy-handed, quite blunt depictions of, there's no other way to describe it, but hyper-violence in that book. Like the text is so graphic, and it melds that into something far sharper and sleeker, almost chic depiction of the 80s, but with a background of violence. It seems to balance these overall themes of brutality and consumerism very well with what it's trying to satirize. It's really commenting on the absurdity of hyper-consumerism, consumerist culture, but also in the context of the Wall Street excessive lifestyles that is shown in the book. The filming adaptation is much better, in my opinion, at turning this horror narrative into social critique. One of the things that I love about the film version as well is that you get this fantastic 80s backdrop soundtrack to it. It makes the film feel more lived in. It forces you much more harshly to look at the superficiality of this period of time compared to the book. I think so much of the book is overshadowed with just the violence of it all. To me, the film offers a bit more nuance. I would love to hear your opinions. Question 7, what is the next horror novel that you are excited to read? Currently, I am reading Bright Young Women. I have put this down twice already, and I think also it didn't help that a book came out that I really wanted to read, so I put it down for that one. But I put it down before. I'm only 50 odd pages in. But I'm still optimistic. I just need to give it a bit more of a chance because I've heard incredible things about this. But I would also really like to reread Coraline next. I love this book. This is a 5-star, and I would just, yeah, that's one I want to reread. And then I was given a book this week, which means it's going to get bumped up my TBR a little bit more. It is called Botanical Curses and Poisons, The Shadow Lives of Plants. And it is beautiful. I don't know if you can see. It's kind of bronzy and gold, and it's got this lovely botanical yet kind of gothic artwork. Can you see the skulls? Yes. This is described as, poisonings are among the most memorable deaths in history, from the Roman Empire to the medieval era and beyond. Concealed and deliberate, it's a crime that must be planned in advance, and yet there is a fine line between healing and poisoning. Only the dosage matters. Throughout history, human trial and error has led to the sharing of incredible stories about the effects of toxic plants. This book returns to archives to uncover fascinating folklore, lurid histories, and untold stories behind deadly plants, witching herbs, and fungi. Filled with beautiful illustrations, this treasury of folklore is packed with insights and the revealed mysteries of everyday flora. And these papers as well. Oh, beautiful. Question 8. What is the aim of a good horror novel? By this, I mean, is the main preoccupation of a horror genre novel book, is it to scare us as much as possible? Like, do you think it has pretty much a singular design by the nature of it? Or do you think that there is more that a book from this genre can achieve? And my thoughts on this were that as I've kind of previously mentioned, horror has this wonderful capacity for leaning into and exploring some of the most dark and reprehensible aspects of our human nature, of the world around us, and just some of the atrocities that other human beings or monstrous creatures, other things that can happen. And I think that an exploration of the macabre and the disturbing can be just as unsettling and thrilling in terms of causing the reader to feel fright. Like, one of the books that I said that probably scared me the most was because of the vulgarity of it and the taboo and all these other ugly things that it was dealing with in that work. It wasn't just shocks and twists and turns. It caused me to feel fright in another way, and I think that's something that can be unappreciated about the horror genre, I don't know if you agree, is that it actually has a real element of didacticism. And I haven't studied horror in any academic sense or any way. It's just that I feel a good horror doesn't only try to scare us. I personally, from my own reading, feel like horror books can, I think, through fear, but also distress or disturbing us, all those things that a good horror work can do. The fact that it makes us have some aspects of introspection, but the fact that they linger and make us reflect even via the lens of fear, I think that's one of the most powerful things that a horror work or horror book can do. So I think it's all very well if a horror book can scare us, and that is a singular wonderful joy to feel safely scared in the comfort of your home or wherever you are reading, but also if there can be some deeper emotional resonance with your reading, I think that's also incredible, and I love it when a good horror work does that. Question 9. What is a trope or horror convention that annoys you? For me, this is a horror trope that once I realised it, I couldn't stop seeing it in both movie adaptations and in books, and that is where any cast member or character who isn't white tends to be the person that is killed first. And I often don't see the narrative merit in doing that either. I don't understand why it's essential to the plot that it has to be that person who is picked off first. I know this has kind of become a little bit of a comedy. There's a horror movie called, I think, The Blackening, where they talk about this because they are all black and they think who's going to be the first to die if they're in a horror movie. It's not a bad film, but I was watching Clown in a Cornfield in the last week, and the first character to get picked off was a boy of colour, and I was just like, why? What does this add? Like, I don't get it. And it's also in, I think it's in American Psycho in the film version, it's in Scream 2, I think that Netflix horror movie Babysitter it happens in, definitely in Evil Dead. There's so many. I don't know if it's more prone to cinema than it is in book, but once I realised that, I don't get it. And I haven't obviously done enough academic studying of this theme of race, I suppose, in horror. Like, I haven't looked at that intersection of the two areas, but it's just strange. Question 10. How does atmosphere and setting play a role in your enjoyment of a horror novel? I think setting and location can do a lot of heavy lifting in a horror book. I also love a spooky house, haunted tale, those sorts of books. Setting or a good horror location can make the book feel believable, but also immersive. If there's something familiar in that setting or that location that you can sort of transport yourself into, that brings it back to something real and tangible and makes the spookiness even more evocative. I think whether it's a decaying house, an empty street, a haunted cemetery, endless wildernesses, a dystopian landscape, this builds tension and it primes the reader's imagination. I think as a result of that, even small disturbances can sometimes be amplified or even more terrifying. I would be super curious to know if you have particular settings or particular locations that just give you the willies, that little bit more, like just spook you out, or if you have read any horror works that have a particularly unique horror location. I would be really interested to hear those too. There's a zombie horror book that's set at a theme park that I want to read, and I haven't got around to picking that up yet, but that seems like a really innovative sort of location and setting for a good horror. Those are my 10 questions for my horror tag. I would love to hear your answers and also discuss some more spooky books with you, as always. Please feel free to tag me in your response if you do make a response. I would love to watch it. And also please feel free to tag your own friends in this. I have not set a stipulation on how many people you can tag or who you want to tag. Feel free to share this with whoever. I am recording this on the 1st of October, which means it's officially spooky season, and I just wanted to wish you all a very happy October. Please like, comment and subscribe, and happy spooky season.